Welcome everyone to today's conversation, The Urgent Need for Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, hosted by A Better Balance and Motherly. My name is Jamie Orsini, news editor at Motherly, and I'll be moderating today. I'm honored to introduce Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, who wanted to kick off our event with a few words about why he has been such a longtime champion of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, leading the way since the bill was first introduced in 2012. It was reintroduced just last week in the Senate with strong bipartisan support. Thank you so much, Senator Casey.
Hello, I'm Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey. Thanks for this opportunity. And while I'm unable to join you in person today, I want to express my appreciation for the work that each of you do every single day to advance workers' rights. I know we wouldn't be discussing pregnant workers and their rights had it not been for the work of organizations like A Better Balance and leaders like Deena Baxter, with whom our office has been working for many years. So I applaud your work, and I especially applaud your commitment to justice. As you may know, the vast majority of women who enter the workforce will be both pregnant and employed at some point during their careers. Millions of them in frontline jobs. For too many of these women, their employers are either unable or unwilling to provide basic accommodations during their pregnancy. In fact, women of color are disproportionately represented in frontline jobs and less likely to provide in those jobs safe and supportive pregnancy accommodations. Many are forced out of their jobs, and we cannot abide that in America. We need to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Now, the good news on this is, even though it's like a lot of things in the Senate takes a long time for consideration and passage, in this case, we have Republicans and Democrats agreeing on some basic fundamentals, agreeing on the need to protect essential workers from workplace discrimination. And those Democrats and Republicans have come together with me to introduce a bill that's modeled on the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, passed now more than 30 years ago, that would allow accommodations for pregnant workers to continue working safely. It's a basic concept, this idea of reasonable accommodations as a fundamental part of our anti-discrimination laws, and pregnancy has not been updated like we did for disability. So that's a good model, and that's what we're trying to do with this legislation. The legislation would protect pregnant workers from being forced to take leave or being forced out of a job. It would also prevent employers from denying opportunities to women based upon their accommodation needs. Worker health and safety is, of course, non-negotiable, and we need to make it a priority for everyone, whether they're a pregnant worker or not. It's more important than ever to ensure that we're removing barriers to women's full and complete participation in the workforce. So I look forward to seeing the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act passed into law with your continuing help, and also, of course, then signed by the President of the United States. President Biden would love to sign this bill, I'm sure, and you've made it possible for us to be picking up a lot of momentum to get it passed in the Senate. So thanks for your devotion on this issue and so many other issues to both equality and justice for all workers. And I want to thank you for bringing attention to discrimination against pregnant workers in the workplace. God bless your work, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Casey. Armando Legros is a worker and mother from New York, and after experiencing pregnancy discrimination personally, she became a Better Balance community advocate fighting for change. Armando, will you tell us what happened to you when you were pregnant and what you've done since?
Thank you all for having me. I'm happy to be here to share my story with you all. I worked for an armored truck company in New York when I was pregnant, and pulled a muscle in my stomach doing some heavy lifting at work. My doctor told me to avoid heavy lifting so I wouldn't hurt myself again and gave me a note to bring into work. My manager took one look at the note and sent me home without pay indefinitely. He said I could only work if I had no restrictions, which was company policy. I knew this wasn't true as they had accommodated my coworker with a bad back. And me losing my income so suddenly was devastating. I tried to get another job, but I was showing and I could tell from the interviews that no one was going to hire me. My credit score dropped. I almost lost my apartment when I fell behind on rent. Even when I applied for emergency rental assistance, I didn't qualify because I didn't have any income coming in. I had no choice but to apply for public assistance. When I was around 8.5 months pregnant, my health insurance was cut off. Once my baby arrived, just putting food on the table for him and my then 4-year-old was a challenge. I'm grateful and thankful that I'm back on my feet and in a better place now. But I was so upset about what happened that I spoke out and fought back. I joined up with the Better Balance and began telling my story publicly. First in New York, supporting the Women's Equality Act in 2014, I testified before Congress. I told them about the impacts of facing pregnancy discrimination and how I was forced to use water in my child's cereal because I couldn't afford milk. And those times were very scary times for me. It is time since 2014 to now have this bill be passed and for pregnant women to be treated with the respect that they deserve in this country. I know the devastating economic effect of losing your job and know how hard it's been for so many women in the past year, especially due to the pandemic, and for Black women especially. That's why we need Congress to rebuild our economy in a way that treats women and moms better. And I'm grateful for Representative Nadler from my home state of New York to lead the way with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And as I told Congress when I testified, if you truly value families and children, then you have to make sure that the women who bear those children and raise them can earn the wages they need to support them. And that's never been more truer than today.
Thank you so much, Armanda. Congressman Nadler, U.S. Representative from New York, has been the lead sponsor on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act in the House of Representatives since 2012 when the bill was first introduced. Congressman Nadler, why are you leading the way to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act?
Well, let me first thank Armanda, my fellow New Yorker, for sharing her story today and perfectly expressing why we must pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act this Congress. The bill isn't abstract. It's about parents and workers having to make impossible choices when they become pregnant, about the millions of women like Armanda who suddenly find themselves pregnant, forced out of a job, and struggling to support their families. We should state up front that pregnancy is not a disability, but sometimes due to complications, or even in healthy pregnancies, workers need a reasonable accommodation from their employers, such as a stool, an extra bathroom break, limiting contact with certain chemicals, or reducing the amount of lifting they do. These accommodations are short in duration and typically cost very little to provide. But for millions of pregnant workers, they are critical. That is why, for the last 5 Congresses, I've introduced this legislation to address what I see as a major gap in the law. Pregnant workers are not sick enough to qualify for an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, which Congress passed back in 1978 to prohibit discrimination against pregnant women, has been gutted by the courts. The courts have turned it into a situation where, in order to get an accommodation, the pregnant worker must find another employee who is accommodated, but not just any other employee. They must find a non-pregnant employee similar in their ability or inability to work and working in similar conditions who is accommodated by the employer, and then they must prove discrimination. How many of us can honestly say that we could find someone like that in our workplace? It's almost impossible. None of us have that kind of detailed health and employment history for everyone else with whom we work. It's virtually impossible. And that's why courts sided with employers in more than 2/3 of pregnancy accommodation cases and found that a pregnant worker had not proved discrimination under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is a much simpler solution that creates an affirmative right to an accommodation for pregnant workers, provided it does not impose an undue hardship on an employer. That language is taken directly from the Americans with Disability Act passed back in 1990, and we have over 30 years of court interpretation of exactly what an undue hardship on an employer is. In practical terms, that means that a pregnant woman who needs an accommodation can go to her employer without fear and talk about what she needs and what the employer can provide and come to a workable solution for everyone. Women can stay on the job for as long as they want during their pregnancy. Employers understand their rights and responsibilities, and families will not be forced to make impossible decisions. What millions of families have been through in the last year only makes it more clear than ever how imperative it is to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. We have all seen firsthand that our economy is not set up for working parents, working mothers in particular. As the economy reopened, a wave of employers simply fired pregnant workers rather than finding ways for them safely to return to work. These workers found themselves without a paycheck, without health insurance, and pregnant in the middle of a global pandemic. That's why last year, as the pandemic raged, the House passed the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. I can now tell you that the House has passed the committee has passed the Pregnant Fairness Awareness, has passed the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and we expect it to be on the House floor for passage next week. It's time for the Senate to take up the bill too. It's time for President Biden to sign it into law, and like Senator Casey, I'm absolutely certain that President Biden will sign the law if it gets to him. It's time to finally provide pregnant workers the peace of mind that they can stay on the job, provide for their families, and get the accommodations they need. I want to thank you all again for hosting this event, and I look forward to celebrating with all of you when the bill passes.
Thank you so much to Senator Casey and Representative Nadler for joining us today. And thank you to Armanda for sharing your powerful story. Now we want to speak with advocates about the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and why it is such an important and timely measure. First, I wanted to zoom out and set the stage of the reality for mothers in America today. Motherly is proud to announce the survey results from our latest State of Motherhood survey, where we spoke with over 11,000 moms from across the country in different walks of life. We found that 92% of mothers feel society doesn't do a good job of understanding or supporting motherhood. Moms are exhausted and they don't have the support they need at work or at home, trying to balance keeping their families together and earning enough to afford childcare and put food on the table. But these issues have always been present. The pandemic has just shined a spotlight on and exacerbated them. And one thing that people don't often recognize is that so many of these problems start with pregnancy and pregnancy discrimination. If you're pushed off the job while pregnant, it becomes that much harder to find a good job after you have your baby. If you suffer health complications because you couldn't get what you needed or your baby does, that can have long-term consequences physically, financially, and emotionally. And as you've been hearing, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is an essential measure championed by Congressman Nadler and Casey that would allow pregnant women to stay healthy on the job and earn the income their family needs to be economically secure. Far too often, pregnant workers are just pushed off the job when they need something simple for their health, like a bottle of water or a break from heavy lifting. The economic effects can be devastating, including job loss, loss of health insurance, even a downward spiral into poverty. It's unconscionable that this is happening in 2021. For those who cannot take the risk of economic loss, they feel forced to risk their health instead, and we see the results in our country's devastating maternal and infant health statistics. Motherly is dedicated to supporting the PWFA and other maternal health measures, as well as paid family leave and affordable childcare. Mothers need support on truly nonpartisan, no-brainer issues. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act has bipartisan support, passed the US House last year with robust support. Similar measures have often passed unanimously in state legislatures across the country. And our State of Motherhood survey found that 85% of mothers say they would support or vote for a political candidate who supported childcare legislation that did more to actively support mothers, regardless of the candidate's party affiliation. It just makes sense to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. This Mother's Day, we need Congress to take notice and treat moms the way they deserve to be treated. Pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Now, Aina is Executive Director of Black Mamas Matter Alliance, a critical maternal health advocacy organization. Angela, can you tell us more about the link between denying pregnancy accommodations and adverse Black maternal health effects?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. As mentioned, first and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. I am Angela Aina, co-founder, executive director of the Black Mamas Matter Alliance. And really quickly, I want to tell you about our alliance. We're a national network of Black women-led organizations and multidisciplinary professionals that work across the full spectrum of maternal and reproductive health. We operate at this national, state, and local levels and collaborate to advance policy, promote holistic maternity care, cultivate research, and uplift culture to advance Black maternal health, all rooted in birth justice, reproductive justice, and the human rights framework. What we know is that Black mothers have among the highest labor force participation rate in the country. And 80% of Black mothers are their family's primary breadwinners. Nearly 30% of pregnancy discrimination complaints are actually filed by Black women. This is because of the multiple forms of discrimination Black workers and other workers of color too often face in the workplace. When Black pregnant people must continue working without accommodations, they risk miscarriage, they experience excessive bleeding, and other devastating health consequences. Black women have the highest incidence of preterm birth, and yet we know that workplace accommodations, such as reducing heavy lifting, bending, or excessive standing, can actually help to prevent preterm birth, which we know is the leading cause of infant mortality in this country. Black women are also at higher risk of preeclampsia, which is one of the leading causes of maternal mortality. We are still learning about how to prevent this dangerous medical condition, yet we know that simply allowing workers to take bathroom breaks, just simple bathroom breaks, can prevent urinary tract infections, which are strongly associated with preeclampsia. Similarly, ensuring pregnant workers can drink a significant amount of water can also help pregnant workers maintain their blood pressure, which is critically important since hypertensive disorders lead to maternal morbidity and unfortunately mortality. The Black Mamas Matter Alliance, in collaboration with A Better Balance, invited Black women leaders from 9 states for a listening session to provide an opportunity to share how they directly support Black mothers in their efforts to navigating employment throughout their pregnancy, specifically as their experience relates to the need for pregnancy accommodations in the workplace. As we convened together, one outstanding message was clear. Black mothers are suffering both economic hardship and negative health outcomes due to pregnancy discrimination and the lack of support in the workplace. This critical legislation will enable pregnant workers, particularly Black women, to ask for and receive accommodations that are reasonable and timely, and to stay healthy and connected to the workforce, which we know that this piece of legislation is long overdue. We thank you, we thank A Better Balance, and all those decision makers that will do the right thing and help us into supporting Black pregnant people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Deena Baxter is co-founder and co-president of A Better Balance, the co-host of today's event, and leaders in the fight to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. A Better Balance launched the movement in 2012. Deena, why is the PWFA needed now more than ever before?
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you to Motherly for co-hosting this Week of Action event. And a sincere thank you, first of all, to Senator Casey for his kind words about A Better Balance and his leadership, and to Representative Nadler. Wow, you've been our champion from the very beginning, and it's just been an honor to have been working on this issue and with you, pushing forward in Congress for so long. And as you said, let's hope, we get it done next week in the House and then on to the Senate. Angela, thank you for your partnership and your really powerful words and articulating so powerfully the health case for this law. It was just incredible and so well said. And Armanda, I am just so proud to have been in this fight with you for so long, and thank you for your leadership and your bravery. Just so you know, A Better Balance, we have been fighting for pregnant worker fairness since 2012. Our mission is to help workers care for themselves and their loved ones without risking their economic security. We know these work-family issues impact all of us. That's become very clear in the pandemic, but we know that it's low-wage workers, particularly mothers of color, who are hardest hit, who have the least workplace supports, face the most rigid, difficult workplace rules and environments, and why we saw that this was a real challenge. And it was really forcing women to make impossible choices between earning a paycheck and having a healthy pregnancy. And as you heard from Armanda, it seems so simple, a modest accommodation, but the economic consequences of not accommodating a pregnant worker can be profound. We've heard from thousands of pregnant workers over the last almost decade with the same exact story. No one should wind up homeless because they need a temporary lifting restriction. Nobody in America should end up in the hospital because their employer won't let her carry a water bottle. We need to start treating pregnant workers and mothers in this country with the respect and decency that they deserve. And the reason that we're not there yet is on this issue is because there is still a gap in our federal civil rights laws, as you heard Representative Nadler say. We have a gap that we are still in a world where pregnant workers need to jump through legal hoops to get the most basic common sense accommodations, including extra bathroom breaks, modifying work schedules, things that are reasonable to do. And if they cause an undue hardship, an employer doesn't need to do it, but they need to try. And this is what this bill is about trying to help pregnant workers maintain their health, continue earning a paycheck. And so we are hammering home the message for this Pregnant Worker Week of Action: listen to workers. Armanda has been talking about this since 2014. We hear from women, every day on our free legal helpline, which, by the way, go to our website. We have a free legal helpline. We have educational resources for workers. We have worked around the country to pass this law, but every woman in America needs these protections, along with paid family leave and quality affordable childcare and so much more. But let's start with pregnancy, and let's get this important measure done as a first step to show that we are going to treat, pregnant workers with, as I said, the respect and decency that they deserve. So we're calling on Congress now to pass the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act, along with, the American Families Plan and the Jobs Plan, but the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act can get done now. This is a bipartisan bill. Congressman Nadler has been leading the way in the House. We've had 2 hearings. This should pass and, on to the Senate to hopefully, build momentum there. And I just urge everyone, though, not to take anything for granted. We need advocacy, we need action, and we need everybody to raise their voices and call for passage of this law. Nobody can say it better than workers, like you heard from Armanda. So I want to close by sharing a montage of some other workers recently who couldn't be with us on this afternoon's event, but wanted to share this montage of their words on why this law is so important.
I didn't really need accommodations until about April, and I started to become very dizzy and nauseous. And I had asked them if I could have a water bottle to kind of help with that, just near my workspace, and they refused me that. I thought because the conditions were kind of bad with the heat, the slick floors, and there were multiple COVID cases going around, that things would be different and I would be accommodated, but I wasn't.
They used the lifting restriction to not allow me to come back to work, which caused my family at that time a lot of hardship because I was only about 4 months pregnant when they told me I could no longer work.
My pregnancy was highly stressful and I suffered severe complications, likely due to stress. Daily, I juggled filing paperwork for public assistance programs such as food stamps, WIC, Medicaid, and unemployment.
I was devastated. I was put into a position to choose between safety and supporting my family and maintaining my health insurance.
I think that it's important for pregnant women to also have job security. That's one less stress that we have to worry about while we're pregnant.
I definitely will continue to fight. You know, we weren't asking anything wild or anything. We just wanted, you know, just a little accommodation, just for a little while.
I know when I speak for moms out there, when I say we are exhausted. A pregnant woman is valuable. We're valuable to the country. We're valuable to the workforce. And it's time that we start getting treated that way.
It is the real deal. We need this because every woman deserves a healthy pregnancy. Every woman deserves a healthy baby.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to wrap up and to just say, if there's one thing that you can do, as we're saying this entire week, respect pregnant workers, honor mothers, demand equality, and call your representative and urge them to pass the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act this Mother's Day. Thank you so much for joining us.
What a powerful way to end our discussion today. These women have definitely left us with a call for action. With that, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to all of our panelists. You can join A Better Balance and Motherly and the movement. Visit abetterbalance.org to find out how you can take action and urge your elected officials in DC to pass the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act today without delay. Thank you.